Hello and welcome, or welcome back, as the case may be, to the Atlantean Archive. I almost said empire. Yes, this is the fabled Empire of Atlantis. For those of you who have long dreamed of what it would actually be like, this is it. This is it right here. Enjoy the view while it lasts before it sinks again, which it may very well do. Thank you for stopping by today. Now, if you're a regular viewer of this channel, you may be surprised because I released a video earlier today, and that is absolutely unprecedented for me. Typically, it takes me a week and a half, 2 weeks, often, unfortunately, longer than that, to release new content, and that is simply because my life is insane. I have special needs kids, as I've mentioned before, and that makes things interesting to say the least. So I put out new content as I'm able to do, and I appreciate those of you who have been long suffering in that regard, who have subscribed and liked and commented, given me feedback on the channel. Thank you very, very much. We're actually at the 1-year anniversary of this channel, which may be today or it may be yesterday. I'm not sure which. You would think a content creator would know that, and an organized content creator, yes, would know such a thing, but you're not dealing with an organized content creator here. So I'm just going to have to estimate. And this year, the reason why I wanted to squeeze another video in so quickly is this is Garbaugust, a month-long reading event dedicated to the reading of trashy fiction. That is fiction that is often fun, but of dubious quality, dubious literary value, the sort of thing that makes your college literature teacher who reads Shakespeare for relaxation react like this. This event was created by a YouTuber by the name of Criminali. If you haven't seen his channel, do stop by, show him some love, and give him some thanks for creating this remarkable booktube event. This is the greatest thing ever. Trashy fiction. Who doesn't love trashy fiction? This is your guilty pleasure fiction category. Now, if you haven't seen them, I've released 2 videos for Garbaugust. The first involved the first 2 adult-level horror novels that I ever read. Check that out if you get a minute. The second one, which I released just earlier today, were reviews for novelizations of John Carpenter's original 1978 Halloween and the original Friday the 13th. Yes, believe it or not, they did actually create novelizations for both of those movies. They are fantastically expensive online, but there are PDFs. You can download those and get the experience for yourself. Take a look at the video when you get a chance. Find out if that's something you actually want to do. But I did want to squeeze in one more trashy video for a trashy book for this month dedicated to trashy fiction. And that is this book here, The Vampire Memoirs by Traci Briery. All right, no more of that, I promise. The Vampire Memoirs by Traci Briery. Actually, it says Mara McCuniff and Traci Briery. Mara McCuniff is this gal right here. She is the protagonist. She is the lead character in the story. She is a 1,600-year-old vampire. This book she's not real. She's listed as co-author just for fun, but not real, in case you needed that to be clarified for you. This book was published by Pinnacle in 1991. I used to see this in used bookstores back in the day. It was one of those things I was curious about. You know, every once in a while you keep seeing a book and you're like, maybe I should check that out sometime. Every once in a while you hit pay dirt, like I did with Swan Song. Also, a review of that is available out there, plugging the review. But this book, I wouldn't classify it as pay dirt. I have read much worse. I'll tell you that. I mentioned during my review of the Halloween 1978 novelization that it's just not a very well-written book. There's a lot of interesting information in it, but not well-written. This book is written better than that. Now, Traci Briery has written several horror novels. I don't think she's produced anything in recent years. I did come across an interview with her here on YouTube. It's the only interview I've ever seen, and if I can find the link to that, I'll put it in the video description if you want to check that out. There's a guy who's a super fan of this particular book who wanted to locate her, finally tracked her down, and interviewed her about the book. She wrote a sequel, which I have not read, but which the interviewer and the author both agreed was not good. And I probably will not bother to ever read that one then. When an author tells you their book is not good, you should probably be advised to take them seriously. The Vampire Memoirs, however, is a fairly competently written book, I would say. It's an interesting story on a number of levels. It's unfortunately very uneven. Now, I'll give you just my quick overview of it. And as far as I know, This is not available in PDF, but then again, I didn't search, so maybe it is. I might have wanted to do that. But it's definitely not available in Kindle. I know that. The paperback editions of this are available for about $7 and upwards. I got this one, I think, for $2 or $3 on Amazon. So you can still get this book fairly cheaply, unlike Halloween and Friday the 13th, which are going from anywhere from $300 all the way up to $3,000. Believe it or not. I posted that video review of the Friday the 13th novelization today with an image from Amazon, which has to be seen to be believed. $3,999 for that book. That's what the crazy person on there wants. This, $7, much more modest, much more affordable, if you should choose to read it. Now, this is very typical of the type of the type of horror novel that was being released in the 70s, the 80s, up through the early 90s, a typical type of paperback from hell. The protagonist here, this lady on the front, this vampire woman, Mara, is a 1,600-year-old vampire. She was created by the original vampire who sought out the secret of immortality and through the dark arts transformed himself into a creature of the night and sets his sights on Mara and ultimately transforms her, as you've already guessed. And this is the story of the centuries that she spent wandering the night. The story originally of how she met this vampire, Agyar was his name, how he set his sights on her, transformed her, took her away from the life that she had established. Mara was an interesting character. She is raised by her father. Her mother dies in childbirth. She's born in the year 362 in Britain, so not long after the Romans abandoned the colony. And her father, who is a bit of a nutcase, even by the standards of his own people, is a fierce warrior. He does not want a daughter, he wanted a son. So when he gets this girl, doesn't quite know what to do with her, well, what else do? You tell her, don't act like a girl. As far as you're concerned, you're not a girl, you're a boy. So he raises her that way, raises her to be a warrior, and she turns into a fearsome warrior. As a matter of fact, she's very similar in her character traits to Agnes de Chastain, who is also known as Dark Agnes, a character Robert E. Howard created in his Sword Woman stories, which are very good stories, by the way. If you haven't read those, do check those out when you get time. Now, I don't know if Traci Briery read those stories and sort of used Dark Agnes as a model for Mara. She may very well have, or this may have been something she came up with on her own, just imagining what a female warrior would be like in that time. Either way, I think the character is actually pretty well done. Now, the book is divided into 3 sections. The first third of the book describes Mara's background, tells you about her upbringing, her reluctant marriage to a man named Gaarus, who takes an interest in her and hounds her until he finally breaks her down and she falls in love with him, agrees to marry him, and they start a family together. And then how Agyar enters their life, intent on making her his vampire bride. And of course, you know, from the story, the nature of the story is successful. The second part of the story has to do with her break from Agyar and her life. I hope I'm not spoiling things too much here. It has to do with her life in the centuries from all through the Middle Ages, the Victorian era, up into modern times, what Mara is doing with herself during those years, how she ends up in the United States, ultimately in California, because, you know, that's where else are vampires in the U.S. going to go? They go to California.
One thing about living in Santa Carla I never could stomach. All the damn vampires.
The nightlife there just suits them, and they don't attract too much attention. So Mara finds herself out there. The last third of the book involves her attempts to find romance in the modern world, to find someone who will accept her and love her for who she is, and the return of a mysterious figure, an enemy from the past, and I will leave that to your imagination. I don't want to spoil it too much for you. This is actually a fun read. As I mentioned, it's very uneven. The first third of the book is definitely the best part of it. It's the best written. It's the best plotted. It's the best story. The second part of the book bogs down. Unfortunately, it's not as interesting, although there are a few standout moments. I did like a few of the things that she did with Mara. There's one section where Mara is known for driving around in a wagon pulling a coffin, and she becomes known to the locals as the Coffin Lady. She basically starts her own urban legend which she finds amusing. Later on, she works as a barmaid, ultimately as a prostitute. She calls herself the best whore in London, and so there are some highlights in there. She befriends a little girl who loses her family and becomes sort of a daughter to her for a period of time, reminding her of the family that she once lost. And then you get, of course, into the third part of the book, which, in my opinion, is definitely the weakest. Now, as good as some parts of this book are, and as readable as it is a quick read. It flows very quickly, except for those passages that I mentioned get bogged down a little bit in the Middle Ages, in the Victorian era. The end of the book, however, it just seems like it's kind of contrived. It reminds me very much of the famous film cliche where the hero battles the villain, and you think the villain is dead, the hero, and usually the girl he's trying to rescue walk away, and then you see the villain open his eyes. He's not dead after all. It's a similar thing, and as powerful as this villain is, it's resolved with absurd ease, as far as I'm concerned. It is just not believable given the setup. The whole thing, as a matter of fact, feels very rushed, and it was awkward reading. Mara along the way, or Mara as the name is actually pronounced, she makes that clear in the book. Mara has over the centuries developed certain superpowers. She is somewhat a figure of awe in the vampire community. She doesn't mix with them too much. She keeps more of a low profile, but she's sort of a figure of awe because she's so old and because she was created by the first. And the vampires around her, particularly one that she gets to know and doesn't trust, are very interested in who the first was, what this guy was like. And Mara is not really wanting to get too much into that for reasons that will become clear as you read the story. And many of you who are familiar with this kind of stuff can probably already guess what that reason is. So it just feels contrived. It feels rushed. The setup with this super powerful villain just really seems to fall flat at the end. That's my biggest complaint with this book. There's a few boring sections, and then the ending that is just rushed in an unrealistic fashion and falls flat. As I said, Mara has developed certain superpowers, but these are just mentioned out of the blue. And it's not like a gradual development that she figures out about herself over the centuries. She just suddenly mentions that she has these fantastic powers because of her great age, and probably also because of the fact that she was made by the original vampire and still has his essence as part of her. So that, in a nutshell, is The Vampire Memoirs by Traci Briery. Far from the worst horror novel from that era that I've ever read. Very readable in many ways. Any detracting factors I can think of, it's not overly gory. You do get some descriptions of violence, obviously, given the nature of it, but they're not over the top by any means. There's some sexuality involved in this, but again, not over the top by any means. Some people, I went out on Amazon real quick before I did this video. I was just reading through the reviews. A lot of people really like this book, and those who listed some negative qualities about it mentioned that it's awkward reading the story of an ancient life in such modern vernacular. The way that she looks back and describes her past, she's using contemporary jargon, contemporary terms, and that sort of takes you out of the ancient background, the historical background of the story. So that may be something that you might find as a detracting factor. It did me a little bit too when I first started reading it, but then I got used to it and just made allowances for it. That's just the style that the author has chosen for this. But then it's kind of odd because she changes in the middle of the book. Traci's writing style changes. When she's in the Victorian era, for instance, when Mara is going through her prostitution phase, she starts using a Cockney type accent. So it seems like she's trying to be authentic to the period then, and that's a little bit of a jarring transition. But anyway, that's just a stylistic choice that the author made, but some of you might find that an irritant. So, The Vampire Memoirs by Traci Briery. Definitely worth a read if you like vampire fiction, if you're into that sort of thing. A quick, easy read, and far from the worst that I have read in that genre by far. It does have good memorable moments, which I don't want to get into for fear of spoiling the content for those of you who do want to read it. And this is the last book that I wanted to get in for Garbaugust. Definitely trashy, fun fiction reading. And I hope if you have time, you'll check it out. Give it a read. If you have read it, let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think. Do you agree with my analysis of the book, or am I way off? What's your impression of it? Have you read anything else by Traci Briery? Are you Traci Briery and you want to berate me for my treatment of your book? Either way, however you feel about it, whoever you are, let me know what you think about the book. So thank you for watching this video. Thank you for sticking with me through this first year on my channel. I appreciate the support that many of you have given, that you've reached out and commented and shared your insights on the various content that I've covered so far on the channel. Lots of Lovecraft, Robert E. Howard so far. Edgar Rice Burroughs, got into him recently. All that sort of stuff available on the channel. If you want to go back, take a look at those previous videos, watch the heck out of them, share them with other people. That's not doing me any harm. I also mentioned, since this is Trashy Fiction Month, I'll go ahead and give it another plug after I finish shaking my camera here. This is my own trashy book, Descendant Darkness. It's got a strip across the front because it's a proof copy that was sent to me. But this is my retro vampire novel. For those of you who grew up in the 70s and 80s like I did, watching Kolchak and Dark Shadows, The Night Stalker, that kind of stuff, this may be right up your alley. The vampires do not sparkle. They do not play baseball. They are serious and hopefully a little bit scary. So if you've read this book, let me know what you think. I'd appreciate that as well. If you have, please consider giving a quick review on Amazon. All the exposure an indie author can get always helps. But that's my own trashy book that I wanted to make mention of a few times here for a month dedicated to trashy fiction. So thank you again for watching. Thank you for those of you who have subscribed and shared and all of that stuff that I just mentioned ad nauseum here. I appreciate you being here on this channel. Let me know if there's anything you'd like me to cover in the future. September, I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. Sumerian September is what I did last year, a booktube reading event created by Michael K. Vaughan, a Robert E. Howard fan extraordinaire. Created Sumerian September to read the original Robert E. Howard Conan fiction. So I participated in that, got some Conan videos on the channel if you're interested. I'm not sure what I'm going to do for that this year. I'll go back to Robert E. Howard, at least in some way, shape, or form. I think Michael Vaughan's emphasis this year is going to be on pastiche Conan fiction by L. Sprague de Camp and everybody who isn't Robert E. Howard. So we'll see how that goes. I might try to get something in for that. But thanks again for stopping by. Check out the Vampire Memoir if you get a chance. Let me know what you think. And until next time, God bless.
All the damn vampires.